Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. My guest on this two-part episode is Rocky Walls. He's a Noblesville, Indiana entrepreneur, director, artist, and collector whose independent film, Dirty Laundry, is about to premiere. Part 2 drops next week. It features the film's co-stars, Wray and Charlie Schultz. Join me now as I go on the aisle for a conversation with Rocky. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well.
Now, the premiere of Dirty Laundry is coming up soon, right?
It is, yeah, just a few weeks away. Sunday, October 13th.
And where will it be held?
So we're premiering at the Tobias Theater at Newfields.
Excellent.
As a part of Heartland International Film Festival.
Excellent venue. Last time I was there for a Heartland function was they did a premiere of Ashton Gluckman's 5-part History Channel documentary on JFK. So is that where they regularly hold premieres for local films?
I think they try to do world premieres, I believe, at the Tobias Theater because it's the largest venue that they have for the festival. But I do think sometimes premieres are held at other theaters. You know, they have 5 different theater partners. So they have quite a few to choose from, and sometimes they'll have premieres in other locations for various reasons.
Of course, yeah. You mean all the venues they use in their festival?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get started let's talk about the film, and then I'd like to know more about you. I met you, for our listeners. The reason we got to know each other is because one of your actors, Wray. He and his family are longtime friends of mine, and Mitchell actually originated a role in a musical that I co-created with my partner, Dustin Klein, Klein and Alvarez Productions, and Mitchell played the young Alexander Calder, the sculptor. Yeah. And that was right before he went off to star in a touring production of the Broadway show
Finding Neverland. Yeah, Finding Neverland.
So anyway, it's we have an indirect connection, but an interesting one, nonetheless. But we'll get into that later. But let's talk about Dirty Laundry.
Yeah, where do you want me to start? I'll have you ask the first question or two here.
Well, first of all, I want our listeners to know, and that's another part of the show. I want to hear about your documentary background, because as I understand, that's how you got started, and you produced documentaries for a while. So let's actually start there. Tell me about your work as a documentary filmmaker.
Yeah, so I would say that not only did we get our start there, but that's who we really are. So we've done this feature-length narrative. We're saying it's our first feature-length narrative, Dirty Laundry, but in some ways, it's the only one. I'm not going to say that we'll never make another fictional work again, but we really do love documentary work, and it all stems from this passion for storytelling and for really finding interesting characters in the world that can inspire people to make positive changes. I think that there's something really, really special about hearing a person's story, about oftentimes being able to see in a film, not just documentary, but especially documentary if it's relevant to you, because it's a part of your local community or maybe a part of your world that you can only explore through film. Those films can be really impactful. They can cause us to see things differently or feel things differently, and that's what we spend most of our time doing. So 12 Stars Media, when I say we, that's who I'm talking about. 12 Stars Media is the production company that I co-founded with my partner, Zach Downs, in 2007. So we're quickly approaching our 20-year anniversary as a company. And we've done several documentary films. We've been a part of, I think, 4 of the last 5 Heartland International Film Festivals. We've had at least 1, if not 2, documentary shorts in the last, I think, 3 or 4 indie shorts film festivals here. A lot of our work is focused here in Indiana. And I co-founded also with Zach the nonprofit organization Hoodocs, which you sort of began to allude to at the beginning, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about in this conversation. But that nonprofit organization is all about supporting documentary film work in Indiana, and so that's kind of where my heart sort of fits most is in telling the real stories of people who can invite us to make positive changes in our lives and in our communities.
I happened to be and was pleased to be invited to the wrap party for Dirty Laundry, where we first met, and was really impressed with your facility. Tell our listeners where that is.
Oh, well, we're in downtown Noblesville, Indiana, which is just a short drive from Indianapolis, and we're just 2 blocks east of this very typical I shouldn't say typical, because every one of them are atypical. They're all special. They're all unique in their own way. But when you think of the downtown sort of classic Americana, courthouse square, Noblesville has one of those, and we're just 2 blocks east of it. And it's a fantastic space. We're in a 140-year-old building that was once a home, but has been commercial for a long, long time. And we're on the 2nd floor. 12 Stars Media's studio spaces on the 2nd floor of this building, and then on the 1st floor we have this wonderful kind of quaint family-owned and operated bakery that my wife and her sisters operate.
I have yet to visit it, but I know that night I was there, I met your wife, and people I talked to raved about it. So,
Oh,
I'm
yes.
not supposed to eat carbs right now, but I'll cheat. I'll go up there and try stuff. But who are the we in your company? How big is your staff?
Yeah, so we're usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 people, and I say usually because we'll have interns that come in and out. We have a long tenured staff though. So when you think about making a film and you think about the different roles that are involved, we have somebody that's sort of full-time dedicated to usually one of those roles. And so I'll kind of go down the list and give you examples. But my business partner and I, fill ultimately the role of director and producer or executive producer. And then we have a director of photography. Grant Michael is our director of photography. He's been with our company going on 10 years at this point. Our film editor, Glenn Johnson, also been on our team for a very long time and has edited pretty much all of the documentaries that you might be able to see out there in the world that we've worked on. We have an assistant editor, Sean Downs, who also does a lot of our graphic and animation design work. We have a sound mixer, Corey Patterson, that recently started with us and did all of the sound work. This is his first movie project, Dirty Laundry. And so if you're watching it and thinking to yourself, wow, for an indie film, this really sounds great, that's all Corey's work there. And then an assistant camera, Jack Kersey, who also was first assistant director on the film, did a fantastic job of helping us keep everybody organized for the filming, but also he was the one pulling focus that whole time when we were filming. So yeah, that's I believe the whole team. My wife, as you mentioned, is a fantastic baker and runs the bakery downstairs, but she also has been a strong supporter of 12 Stars Media, and she does all of our invoicing and all of our human resources work and anything like that the kind of stuff that will make or break a company in the long run, right? You can you can start a business and run it for a couple of years and probably get away with having poorly managed paperwork, but eventually that stuff catches up with you. So probably the real reason we're still in business after almost 20 years is because of her incredible support.
Well, that's what I call longevity in this business for a small independent company. I would say that you've done really well. How are you funded?
So we're privately funded by, at this point, our own success over the course of these 20 years. When we started, Zach and I, we were two young people with really no idea what starting a business even meant. We just thought to ourselves, well, we know how to operate a camera. We know how to do a few things on the computer. Let's try this out and see what happens. And we had no investment, no private funding at all. No, not even at that point in time. In 2007, we were in the middle of, we were starting a major recession. Not a lot of opportunity to raise funds in any way, and so we just started off with kind of the little bit of money that we had saved up, and have carried it through since.
Wow, that's really impressive, truly. So, what are some of the titles and the subject matter of those documentaries? Your
Yeah,
most successful ones.
yeah. So our first documentary that we did was a feature-length film called Finding Hygge, and it basically explored Denmark's secret to happiness. And so we, in 2017, went over to Denmark. We took our whole team and we filmed for about 10 days in Denmark and in the UK. We also filmed in Canada. We filmed in Colorado. And we basically asked people to explain this concept of hygge. And if you've not heard of it, that's okay. There were a lot of books written on it. Couldn't go
Tell
to.
me that again.
Yeah, it's called hygge, Hyggge, and that's a Danish word, so that's why it doesn't sound
Okay.
anything like it looks.
All right.
So it's a term that became, as I mentioned, really popular in 2016, 2017, because during a time in the U.S. and in the UK, you have to remember this was, shortly after Trump's election. This was shortly after Brexit. And in the UK and in the US, we were entering a time where, in a lot of ways, we still are existing and living through, where division and a serious lack of unity has sort of, I think, become forefront in many of our minds. And so I think people were looking at that point in time for something to, I don't know, be a little bit more comforting and perhaps provide some answers into how we could bring back a little bit of unity, bring back a little bit of how do we live in a time period that is oftentimes very difficult, stressful, a lot of uncertainty. And so we started looking at, I think when I say we, a lot of folks in the UK and in the US started looking at Scandinavian countries, who often, if you're not familiar, Scandinavian countries often rank very high on the World Happiness Index. They're often rated some of the most, happy countries in the world. And, we were kind of, I think, wondering, well, why? Why is Denmark so happy after all? Why is Norway or Sweden so happy after all? And we explored this concept of hygge as one possible explanation. Of course, there's no one explanation for any of that. In all countries, by the way, after spending a lot of time researching this and making a whole documentary film about it, all countries have their own challenges. Denmark is not a utopia. None of the Scandinavian countries are. But there is a lot of contentment. There's a lot of social welfare in Denmark and in Scandinavian countries. There's a lot of reason for people to feel very safe and supported by their government, by their peers, by their society, their communities. At the time that we made this film, I don't know if it's still the case, but at the time we made Finding Hygge, Denmark had more social organizations for people to be a part of per capita than any other country in the world. They're a very connected country, a very connected society. And so we explored some of that in the documentary. Hygge, if you look at the books that were written about it, Hygge is often sort of erroneously distilled down to this idea of coziness, that you can put on a pair of fuzzy socks or wrap yourself in a blanket and make yourself a cup of hot cocoa and sit by a fire, and that's hygge, because it's something that makes you feel safe and makes you feel comfortable. But in reality, and even in Denmark, well, maybe especially in Denmark, because Danes, I think, were somewhat offended by that oversimplification. In reality, it's actually rooted in so much more. It's much more rooted in their their safety net in their social welfare system and in their relationships that they have with one another. And so we started to explore that and ask ourselves, what kinds of things would Americans or Europeans, other folks outside of Scandinavian countries, what kinds of things would we need to do in
Mhm.
order to feel more of that safety or more of that comfort? And so that's where the journey kind of took us.
Well, I'll have to check it out. Where is it available
It
online
is. It's
or
yeah.
is
It's very easy to find as long as you can spell hygge. If you look up Finding Hygge, Hyggge, it'll take you right to the
okay?
film's
Well,
website.
you made me, or I am reminded now that I actually do know a few Danes. When I was a young person living in Washington, D.C., I met a friend of a friend. She and her husband were from Denmark, and now that you now that you talk about it, I just recall her as just having both of them just the most sunny, positive dispositions. And I remember them telling me all about, and then most recently, I have friends here in Indianapolis who traveled to Denmark and they became close to a family, and they visit each other regularly. And that's the same case. And I remember having a long talk with their with the husband of this couple, and he was talking all about the healthcare and how the government supports and there's a lot of pushback, as you know, about quote socialism. And
Hmm.
yeah, and of course he also made it clear that there's a downside to that too. It affects the economy, when all that is shared equally by everybody and everyone benefits from it. So in any case, I don't know, is there any ideal economic, economy anywhere in the world? But yeah, so yeah, that sounds like a really fascinating film. How to do?
It did really, really well. We screened at, oh gosh, I don't know, dozens of film festivals globally, lots of film festivals here in the US and in Europe, but also, Buddhist film festivals in parts of the world that we never would have even imagined, would be interested in the topic. And so did really well. The country's visitors bureau, essentially Visit Denmark, picked up on it, and they ended up partnering with us to put together a giant campaign. I think they spent over $1 million on this campaign where
It's
they
fabulous.
gave away a trip. They gave away a trip to Denmark every day in December that
Wow.
year, like an advent calendar. You could go
Yeah.
to the website and you could watch a little clip from our film, and you could enter to win. You open a door like an advent calendar, and
Wow.
they gave away, yeah, 24, I think, trips leading up to Christmas that year. And then we were honored with the ability to also screen the film up at the Ted Rogers Cinema in Toronto, where they hold Hot Docs every year, the
Hmm.
North America's largest documentary film festival. I just remember when we screened there, I believe it must have been early 2019. It was in January or February, and it was cold and it was snowy in Toronto. And the Ted Rogers Cinema can hold upwards of 600 people. And we screened for 2 nights, 2 consecutive nights, and both nights they had sold out the theater, and there were 30 or 40 people waiting
Hmm.
outside in the snow on
Wow.
standby, hoping that people would not show up so that they could come in and fill the theater. And I just remember I was there with our DP, Grant Michael. He and I went and attended the screenings, and I just remember thinking, like, it doesn't get any
Of
better than this.
course.
I mean, it just, for people to want to show up and watch your film, and for them to be so excited about the message of the film, and to be there and support it, it's truly the best feeling in the world. And so, you have, that's like good and bad, right? Because you also have what we
Sure.
call the post show blues, and being in theater. I'm sure you're familiar.
Oh
You
yeah.
have a big experience like that, and you perform, or in our case, you screen a film, and then afterwards you just think, well, it's over. Now what?
Well, those Toronto audiences are highly educated and informed because, of course, of the Toronto International Film Festival, having been there a long time. And prior to
Mhm.
that, it was the
Oh, for
Festival
sure.
of Festival. And Well, you and I have something in common, as you know. I used to produce documentary films, and
Hmm.
I've spent some time up in Toronto, and I love that city, and I
It is
love the
wonderful.
support of the
Yeah.
arts in general. But and the Canadian people are just the best, eh? So, and there's so much truth to the all those stereotypes about how polite they are. I just never sense that kind of like low-hanging fear that you can get in the United States sometimes about, always watching your back. There, it just feels safe. But I understand the culture's changing a bit, but I hope not too much.
Yeah, yeah, I hope not. Yeah, yeah, you mentioned that. It's actually funny. We can maybe switch from the topic of Denmark and finding hygge after this, but it is interesting that you mentioned safety. One of the things that Danes are sort of famous for, it's actually really interesting. We saw it happen a lot when we were in Denmark. I visited 4 or 5 times over the course of the last several years, and it's sort of commonly known that Danes will actually leave their babies in their strollers or their prams right outside of a coffee shop or a grocery store when they go in. And it's something that Danes have actually gotten in trouble for doing it here in America. They'll
Ah,
come here and they'll leave a baby outside, and then they'll get into trouble because you just don't do that here. And
interesting.
something I thought was very, very interesting. And this is a quote or a sort of a, I don't know, an idea that has stuck with me ever since I heard it the first time. But there's this idea, people will ask Danes, they'll say, well, you left your child out in the stroller outside while you went into the coffee shop. Who's watching your baby? Who's watching your child? And a Dane's response is, well, of course, everyone.
I love that.
Where in America, our tendency would be to assume the worst, to assume
Yes.
a lack of safety, to assume that a passerby might have, malintent for my child. And in Denmark, the expectation or the understanding is that, well, we support each other, we take care of each other. And again, Denmark isn't a utopia, but I found that to be a really puzzling illustration of the difference between the way we view our societies and the way we view safety and
Well,
comfort.
I mentioned the word fear. That's kind of built in
Hmm.
our culture, and it's only getting worse
Yeah.
with all the gun violence, right? These days, you
Hmm.
can't take it for granted that you can sit in a restaurant, a movie theater, go to a mall. There's no place that has
Hmm.
not been. So, tell me about a few more of your projects, and I really want to know more about the film. But what were
Yeah.
some of the other docs that you did? Just if you could give me some brief
Hmm.
highlights.
Yeah, well, by way of transition, we came back from that international project and really wanted to start focusing more and more on Indiana. And so all of the other projects that we've done, although you could watch them from anywhere and you could get,
Is it all
something
on
from
your
them.
website, by the way? All of your history there?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can go to 12starsmedia.com and see our work. You can look on Hoodocs, as I mentioned
Yeah.
before, HOODOX. Most of our work is there, along with the work of dozens and dozens of other filmmakers across the state. But we came back and we did a film called I'm Be Prez, which is a film about an Indianapolis artist and furniture maker and urban lumber recycler. His name's Brian Presnell, and it's called I'm Be Prez because that's how he signs his artwork. That's how he is known on social media, on Instagram, and things like that. But we followed him for about a year and a half through his business and a lot of his various projects and his sort of encouragement to folks in Indianapolis to think about where they're sourcing their lumber for their projects or what kinds of local artists they're supporting. And so it's a really, really narrow, sort of singularly focused film about this one individual who just speaks to so many things that we're passionate about, supporting local, supporting artwork, thinking about recycling, thinking about getting materials locally and things like that. So we went from this like huge international project that featured a dozen different people to just narrowing in, really focusing on Brian Presnell. and it's just such a fantastic film. It premiered at Heartland in 2021, I believe. And then we started a project that's ongoing now called More Than Corn. And in 2022, we premiered the very first of an ongoing docuseries called More Than Corn, in which we explore and shine a spotlight on farms around Indiana that are growing food for people here in Indiana to enjoy and to to increase access to food, and sometimes in places where access is less than ideal. And so we produced the first feature-length film, More Than Corn, and premiered it at Heartland International Film Festival in 2022. And then since then, we've been producing short films about other farms all across the state. And we're now on, I think, the fourth one of those. And so you can see more, you can find out more about that on morethancorn.tv. But we're really passionate about increasing the awareness and inspiring Hoosiers to participate, take action, and really get involved in their local food ecosystem. Thinking about the fact that unfortunately 90% of the food that we eat in Indiana is imported. So, when you think about it, you tell somebody outside of Indiana that you're from Indiana and they think of it like a farm state. They think, oh, it's like all cornfields, right? Like, we get the short end of that stick. But then unfortunately, we also get the short end of the other stick that despite being a farm state, despite being known for farming, we're not even eating hardly anything that we're growing here.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And so there's so much more that we can do. There's so much more that we can involve ourselves in as consumers. We can go to local farmers markets. We can think about buying and shopping from stores and restaurants that source their ingredients locally. And I don't say that to make people feel bad or to put additional pressure. Everybody's stressed. I get it. The cost of groceries, no matter where you get them, are going up. So certainly not trying to make anybody feel bad or guilty, but there's a lot of really great ways that we can participate in our local food economy, even if we're just making small decisions.
Yeah, I was just speaking with a friend at brunch the other day, and he grew up on a farm. And I was telling him how sometimes I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I've been driving I-69 for 40 years, and it bores me to death. And oftentimes I'll take alternate routes, the back roads to Indianapolis. And I always love soaking up, the rural areas where barns and farms, entire farms still exist. And it makes me sad that, that's a piece of Americana that's going away. It's slowly, but it is happening. And I often wonder, like you, as a journalist, as a documentary filmmaker, I'm very curious, and I'm sure you've talked to a lot of those. It sounds like you've talked to a lot of those farmers and found out about their lives and what's important to them, and what it's like to make a living and all those things. And so, have you? I presume you have, and you said all over the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting that you see farms and farmland disappearing, but at the same time, you see young farmers moving back to the family farm.
Is that right?
Thinking about it. Yeah, absolutely. That's happening as well. And so, in fact, just last night, we had the world premiere for one of those short films. It's called Nightfall Farm. And it's, a More Than Corn story. It's one of the farms in the series of More Than Corn stories that we're telling. And we premiered that down at the historic Ohio Theater in Madison, Indiana. There were around 150, 160 people there. And Nightfall Farm is, they're outside of Madison. They're in Caruthersville, but they serve the Madison area through their farmers market. And so that couple, Liz and Nate, who run Nightfall Farm, actually moved back to their family farm. Their parents and grandparents had sort of, frankly, they had failed at farming in the 80s during a time period where a lot of farms were failing, and their family were skeptical a little bit that Liz and Nate would be able to come back and launch a farm that would be successful, but the thing is, we're doing things differently now than we were doing in, every decade. It seems like it changes by necessity. And so Liz and Nate have been, instead of raising or growing commodity crops on the farmland, which is, what their parents had kind of tried to do, they started raising livestock on the farmland and regenerating that farmland, doing, circular regenerative farming where the livestock that they raise help to fertilize and nurture the soil, and then the soil therefore grows pasture that livestock can thrive on. And so they're raising turkeys and chickens and pigs and sheep on this land, and they're doing well. Not that they're completely without struggle or challenge, but they're doing well. And so that's what the story. I have a half an hour short film about them that helps to tell that story and to show people the work that goes into raising this livestock and why it's so much better than what you can find oftentimes in your grocery store chain.
Okay, so how did you move from making documentary films to writing your first screenplay?
Yeah, yeah.
Becoming a feature film director.
Well, so I've been saying that it was sort of a perfect storm of events. I never thought that I would write a screenplay. I just don't love sitting down with a blank page and trying to create something. I think that's why I love documentary film, because I can sort of work with reality as it unfolds in front of me, right? And I can sort of follow someone along. And there's still a very creative storytelling aspect to that, because you have to kind of decide what part of the story you're going to focus on, and you have to kind of decide, when's the story going to start and stop, and how do you edit that to give a viewer a really nice picture to watch. But I thought that there were too many things in the world of fiction that would be really challenging to me in a way that I would be too uncomfortable. I wouldn't enjoy. I wouldn't want to go through that process of creating it all kind of from scratch. And so the only reason that I started even trying was because I was in I think truly a completely despondent, like PTSD state after experiencing a smash and grab looting in San Francisco. We were there for a client project. My team and I were in San Francisco. All of our equipment was in our rental vehicle, and I was 15 feet away from it. I saw another van pull up right next to our vehicle and smash our windows out and start to pull all of our equipment into their van. Yeah, and drive off with it. And so, there was a question of our safety there. Of course, we could not finish the job that we were there to do. We had lost over $20,000 in equipment had been stolen from us. And so basically we had to just go home completely empty-handed.
How did they know what was in your truck?
I think they're very sophisticated, unfortunately, in San Francisco. I think they had spotters there. I think they had people watching, and they had, somebody probably on a phone saying, hey, there, 3 or 4 guys just got out of a van. They look like they have cameras. That's probably, the van's probably full of really nice stuff.
Oh my God.
Of course, they couldn't have known for sure, but I think they just, they took the risk. They kind of gambled on it. They broke our windows, and they got over $20,000 worth of equipment. And about 24 hours later, I'm sorry.
View this everything?
Yeah. Oh, it was still daytime.
What time?
Oh, 5, 6 o'clock. Yeah, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. Around sunset, but it was still daytime. We were in an area where there were
shooting? Where had you
dozens of other people. We were all over San Francisco.
Oh, I see.
Just the previous. Well, it was that morning. In fact, we had shot a beautiful sunrise over the Golden Gate Bridge. And we were just, prepared to finish up the project, but we couldn't, we couldn't finish the project without our equipment. There's nowhere that you can go, even in a big city like San Francisco. There's nowhere you can just, go and just rent a camera for the day. It just doesn't work like that anymore.
Did you drive that truck out from Indiana?
No, of course not. We flew everything in. And so in fact, that's a good segue. We were the next morning sitting in the airport, and I was just, absolutely beside myself, thinking like, oh my gosh, what a nightmare, what a mess. Thankfully we're all safe, but we're going to have to come back out here
Everyone
again in a
wants to
month.
know, did you have insurance?
Oh, of course, yes, yes, we had insurance. But, at the same
Yeah,
time, insurance only covers so much.
of course,
Insurance isn't going to cover the trip
of
back and
course.
forth. Insurance isn't going to cover the fact that I
I
got to
can,
go
I,
back.
I can identify. Certainly, I can understand how that could have been traumatic. Your personal sense of safety. I mean, the violation.
Oh, of course,
Uh,
absolutely. And
yeah,
so, yeah, all that's what I'm thinking about. I'm sitting there in the airport thinking about that. And I just kind of recognized that I needed a creative distraction. And so
yeah.
I I opened up my phone first, I think, and eventually went to my laptop. But I just thought, well, why don't I just start writing something? Why don't I just start messing around with some creative ideas that are probably never going to see the light of day? There was never an intention of writing a whole screenplay, and certainly never an intention of actually producing a film. But
Did you write your own documentary scripts though?
no, our documentaries are unscripted. So
Okay.
we pretty much only work in like the real time, following a person around and letting their story kind of
Okay.
develop as we go.
But was there any other kind of writing that you were engaged in over your career? I mean, other than like,
Not
administrative,
formal, no. Yeah, not formal writing, not in the most traditional sense. I mean, I
how
think
about like how about like proposal letters, business letters, that kind of stuff?
I mean, not any more than the average business person
Yeah, yeah,
deals
just
with.
curious. Because
Yeah,
I
no.
believe, my own experience, I believe that, the old ad, writing is writing is writing. If you're a writer, you can write anything if you put your mind to it.
Well, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of truth to that.
Well,
You're
I've
certainly
experienced,
experienced. Yeah.
well, I come from a TV news background, that was my roots. But in
Yeah,
any
yeah.
case, then I went to musicals and that, so I was just curious whether you went that route too, whether transferable skills.
I think there are definitely transferable skills. It's interesting. If we have time, we can touch on that. I was actually very surprised by how much of the documentary skill set I've established, how much of that translated over
And then again, you're
to
also a
feature film.
storyteller.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's part of who you are. So that's what script writing's about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So in any,
So yeah, that's where it started. I started writing there, just kind of pulling in ideas here and there. It kind of started with a little bit of a joke. I had often told my team that I really wanted to film in a laundromat, but there was never, I mean, we didn't really have any like actual legitimate ideas for filming in a laundromat. But that's
why a
kind of,
laundromat?
I think laundromats are really interesting places. It's a place where it brings together a lot of different people. It's kind of like it's like a library in that way that people can convene there and use the services, and so you never know who you're going to run into there.
So
It's a
tell me
place
how you
where,
tell me how you found your laundromat.
well,
Where is it?
I Googled laundromats and I quickly found that there are basically two different kinds of laundromats in the world. There's the laundromat that's been updated and you can like, tap your credit card or your phone and pay that way. And, it's painted with, all these fresh color schemes and they have, air hockey tables and, gambling machines and all this stuff that you can do while you're waiting. And then there are the laundromats that kind of look pretty much exactly the way they did in the 80s or 90s, and they're all coin operated. And in the case of our laundromat, they have a Miss Pac-Man machine, and they even have a quarter operated payphone. And so I found the one that we ended up filming in just by searching and trying to find one that would match our setting because the film is set in 1997. It's called Tony Ray Laundry, and it's at 56th and Keystone. Anytime I say the name, usually if there's two or three people around, at least one of them, kind of perks up and says, "Oh, I've been there. I did my laundry when I lived over in that area, or I did my
Okay.
laundry." Go
May
ahead.
I interject to tell you that that was my laundry during the 70s because I rented a home on 46th Street and that was the closest laundromat. I had a washer, but I didn't have a dryer in my little bungalow. So I would schlep over there, and I spent a lot of time in that laundry. And when I heard that you filmed there, I thought, oh my God, what a coincidence! Because and a lot of that time I spent reading. And at that time, I was working at Channel 6. So I remember doing a lot of creative stuff in that very laundromat. And to hear that you use that as a location just warmed my heart. And then I started seeing production photos and stuff on the internet, and it was just delightful. It's
Yeah,
just
it is.
delightful.
It is such a cool space, and thank you for sharing your story. It's everybody's is unique, of course, but I've heard so many
I'm
stories
sure.
like that.
It's
It's just very,
wonderful.
very cool. It's very cool. And so yeah,
That's gonna draw an audience for you locally once the word gets out.
I think so. And
Part of your
it's a
audience.
great opportunity to plug some of our merchandise. One of the things that I asked the current owner, who's the third generation owner of that family owned and operated laundromat, I asked him if I could take the painting of their name, Tony Ray Laundry, and put it on a shirt
Oh, cool.
for the film. And so we have those available, and I really hope that people who have those kinds of experiences can pick one of those up. I know that would that would just mean a lot to me if I
Well,
was able to.
save one for me.
Yeah,
I
for
definitely
sure.
want one.
It's a very cool little homage to a
Yeah.
very cool place for sure.
So give us a thumbnail description of the work.
Yeah, so Dirty Laundry is a film about truth and friendship. Basically, in 1997, these two friends, Kyle and Eric, they're kind of dreaming of starting this party photo backdrop business. They want to start a business that kind of merges their talents. Kyle is very artistic. He sketches, he paints. Eric is more hands-on. He's structural, and so they're going to work together and they're going to build these party backdrops. Think in 1997, this wasn't iPhone days, right? And so if you were at a wedding or a graduation or a party, a bar mitzvah, quinceanera, you would potentially, want people to be able to take photos with their Polaroid camera or their film camera, or maybe you would even have a professional photographer. But these guys think that you can have a photo backdrop, custom one made for your event. And so that's what they're going to do. They're going to start this business together. But unfortunately, Eric is coming to their meeting at the laundromat where they're going to talk about the business with this sort of secret, in that he's not so sure that they should pursue this as a career anymore because he's been dealing with his father's disapproval for the last year. His father and his family are a bit more of a traditional background. They think that Eric should go to college. They think he should get a degree. And they're not real happy with the fact that he and Kyle are going to start this business. And so Eric's sort of trying to figure out how to tell his best friend this. And meanwhile, Kyle is talking about the name of their company, and he's showing him drawings, and he's excited about it. And just kind of as Eric starts to maybe be brave enough to break the news, this stranger shows up almost out of thin air, and she walks them through this series of little anecdotes, and she explains to them how truth and friendship can't be separated. She shares this old proverb with them that if you want to go fast in the world, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together with someone else. And then she does this coin trick, and she kind of just unceremoniously leaves the laundromat. Well, fast forward just a few minutes, and the boys all of a sudden realize they are incapable of telling a lie. They have fallen under some kind of spell, and they cannot lie to each other. And they have to then, for the rest of the film, sort out this spell that they're under and try to break it and try to figure out why it's happening and what, if anything, they're supposed to learn from this crazy experience. And so as they work together to break the spell, they end up, revealing secrets to one another, and they kind of have to work it out and figure out whether they're going to end up starting the business or whether they'll even be friends by the time the whole thing is over.
So it's got a little supernatural element.
Yeah, we call it magical realism
Of course.
in film. Yeah, and so it's got a little bit of that. A lot of our reviews that are coming in have I'm very glad. I'm always very happy to see that the work that you put out there
I
is
saw your
being
first
positively
review on
received. Yeah.
Facebook. You posted on Facebook, and it was very complimentary.
Yeah, we've had several, and what I think one of the things that I liked is that they reviewers, critics have acknowledged that yeah, while there's magic and there's a little bit of this
Mhm.
supernatural element, we don't make the movie about that, right?
Mhm.
We don't. It's not all about this spell that they're under. It's really about the two of them and their relationship, and the
Let's talk
spell.
about let's
Yeah.
talk about those actors. You know that they will be on this podcast as well at some point after
I
your
heard that. Yeah, I heard
yeah,
that you
and
had a great conversation with
they
them.
spoke glowingly of your directing style. And so tell me about your experience working with the two of them, Mitchell and Charlie.
Yeah, Mitchell and Charlie were, I mean, just so fantastic, and continue to be because they've worked with us to help
That
promote the
was
film,
Mitchell
and
Wray and Charlie Schultz, correct? Okay.
that's right. Yeah, Mitchell Wray and Charlie Schultz, both Indiana guys. They grew up within about 10 to 15 minutes from each other, but they didn't know each other actually
Mhm. And
until
now
they met.
roommates at the Savannah School of Design.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Savannah College of Art and Design. Yeah,
There
they
you go.
met there. So Mitchell, I found Mitchell through Talent Fusion. Talent Fusion is a local agency. Scott Allen Tucker and I had connected to kind of coordinate casting the film, and Mitchell had been represented by them at one point. But as you mentioned very early on in our discussion, he kind of he left Indiana. He went to California, did some work there, did the traveling show Finding Neverland, and then came back and sort of took a break for high school. Mitchell kind of took step back from acting a little bit, and actually, when I found his profile, I didn't even know if he was still acting. So
Mhm.
I reached out, connected with Chauncey, who I know you know, and Chauncey is Mitchell's mother, and she set us up with a phone call one night in I think June or July last summer.
I might add one of the smartest mom managers you will find.
Yeah, she's doing some things right. That's for sure. And so I think within that first phone call, I was pretty confident that Mitchell was our Kyle. He did submit an audition. We had some other auditions as well. Ultimately, I ended up selecting Mitchell for the role of Kyle, and we spent about 2 months still searching for
Mhm.
our Eric Hernandez, and it was not until Mitchell texted me after getting to SCAD. He'd been at SCAD, I think, for a week or two, and he texted me and said, Rocky, I don't want to step on your toes. You're the director, but I have this friend that I just met. We've hit it off really well, and I think he could be a good fit. And that was Charlie. And
Yeah,
so he introduced me to Charlie Schultz. Charlie sent in a tape for an audition, and I thought this could not be more perfect. These guys are
that's
already friends. They're going to be spending the semester together before we film. It's just,
that's a Hollywood
yeah,
tale if I've ever heard one. How
yeah, yeah. Or even better. Yeah, because there's not even, I mean, it could not have worked out any more smoothly. It's just nice when the stars align.
hmm Well, they have a very natural style. I'm sure you'll agree. And they told me though that you gave them a lot of leeway to develop their characters, and they really appreciated that. You trusted them.
Absolutely, absolutely. We had about 4 or 5 virtual rehearsals, which was, I think,
Yeah, they
you know,
told me that, and I found that fascinating how you pulled that off.
how we pulled off having any at all or so few.
Rehearsals on by Zoom. Or how,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I don't know if it would have worked as well if the two of them weren't physically together at SCAD.
gotcha.
If they were in different places and we had to do it all virtually,
Yeah,
I don't know that it would have worked as well. But because the two of them could sit on that same
yeah.
couch while they were at college, and then
Well,
I was
as
on
you
the
know, a
other
lot
end.
of people worked like that during COVID because they had no choice.
Yeah, for sure. And you've heard, I mean, we've heard at this point mixed opinions of how effective it was. I mean, like people
Yeah,
did it because they had to, but I
yeah.
do think that I do think that there's you lose a lot. But
When they
they
showed up
did.
on the set, I presume that they were pretty prepared.
The two of them yeah, we're talking about Mitchell and Charlie. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. They were very, very well prepared. During the rehearsals, I still wasn't sure. I was asking them, how do you want to go about this? Are you going to want to come to each evening with just that scene like locked in and down, or are you gonna try and memorize the entire script, the entire film? And so we were working out those kinds of details, and I was blown away by not only how much they committed to memory, but as any actor who's listening to this would know and understand, like how much they then internalized and translated that to their own experiences, and being able to really perform it in a way that when you watch the film you can see they're not just nailing their lines, they're
Uh,
they're really feeling what they're saying
and of
in the
course,
way that they
because
should be.
well, back then they weren't roommates, but they were still very close to it. They did their own work away from until they arrived here, correct? They did a lot
Yeah,
on their own.
yeah, each of them had been acting for years. This is their first feature film where I think it's Charlie's first feature film period, and then I know it's Mitchell's first feature film where he's the star. He and I had discussions about that. Then in other projects he's been involved in, he'll pop in here and there in a supporting
Mhm.
role, but
But
this.
he also, we should let our listeners know that he also is very much wants to be a filmmaker himself. So
Yeah, both of them are
on
both of
his
them
own,
are
he's
in. Yeah,
watching work for years, and he's done a lot of TV commercials and stuff. So he's not unfamiliar with a TV set or a set in general.
for sure.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So they had all the ingredients of professional ingredients that in some ways really made it easier for you, did it not?
I think so, yes. I think it would have been much harder because as a first-time director of actors,
Hmm.
I think it would have been I think it would have been maybe an insurmountable task to work with potentially first-time actors.
And how about the rest of your cast? Didn't you had some people from out of town too, didn't you?
Only a couple. There were a couple of minor roles that came from, I believe, Ohio. Most everybody was a Hoosier cast. We had a very predominantly Indiana, Hoosier cast.
Did they all come from Fusion?
Most, yeah. So
Yeah, of
most, yeah. I think the only other cast member that was not through Talent Fusion was the
hmm.
legendary Deborah Asante.
Of
She
course.
plays our mysterious stranger, and I knew her from documentary work that I've done. She and I have crossed paths. She's been in a couple of our documentaries because we've
Don't
done
know
so much in the
Deborah.
art.
She's the artistic director of Asante.
Mhm.
What is Asante's full name?
So Deborah Asante is her name, and then the Asante Art
That's what I
Institute of
mean.
Indianapolis. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Asante Art Institute of Indianapolis. Yeah.
And that's been around for a while, has it not?
Yeah, not by that name. I believe they recently, within the last year or two, changed the name to be even more all encompassing.
I've never
But
seen her acting work. I'll look forward to seeing her.
she was great. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
just such a presence. She's exactly what we needed for this stranger who is only on screen, I think, for like 2 minutes.
I've only seen the trailer that you put out, but I can say just from my own, perspective and experience that, I was really impressed with your production values. But now that you tell me what you've been doing with your documentary company and the talent that you have, all of your crew, I could see it's a really good quality. A
Yeah,
lot of
we
times
yeah.
you can really spot an independent film and you can tell what kind of budget they have based on the lighting and, the sound and all. But I'm really impressed with the way you turned out in the trailer. The trailer is very well done.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, we're very proud of it. We had a lot of people come together to make it look and sound very, very nice. And I do think that for an independent film, my hope and my goal is for people to watch it and get inspired by the story for sure. Absolutely.
Even if it does have a low budget look, that doesn't ever bother me it's the story that counts for me, you know.
For sure.
Good storytelling can overcome anything, you know, the audience
Absolutely.
accept it, you know, that it may not. But of course, these days, that's all changed now. Now people are making movies on their phones and TV broadcast, you know, airs just footage from anywhere these days. Zoom, because of COVID, changed everything.
Yeah, it
Right.
absolutely has. It absolutely has. And our devices, have changed so much. We intake, we see media, we consume media in so many different ways now.
Mhm.
And so much of it too.
We're going to have to wrap this up soon, but tell me, what are you working on now, if anything?
We're working on, getting dirty laundry out there for people to see,
No, I mean, do you have any other projects that you're working on? Are they anything in development? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that we're going to be working on from here, when you think about the future, is More Than Corn. More Than Corn is an ongoing docuseries, and we're excited to. We have two new films in that series that will premiere next year, about two different farms in Indiana, and then we hope to continue that for many years to come, because it's just something that we feel very strongly about,
I
very
just
passionate about.
occurred to me, have you included any Amish farms in your series?
No, we have not. There's that would be interesting.
Well, I think
Certain.
it would be. I being from Fort Wayne, especially in the Fort Wayne area, there are a couple of communities, and all the Amish farms are just beautiful. People,
Yeah,
they're like works of art to me when I go
yeah.
out there. My niece lives in a area. They're surrounded by Amish farms, and
Hmm.
there are these little communities that are in that area up there. Well, all over northeastern Indiana, Shipshewana and
Hmm.
various other places. So anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure there's some good stories up there too. So what do you want to say to my listeners about what they can expect when they see this film? I know you told us a bit about what it's about, but what will they take away?
The film is so focused on the relationship between Eric and Kyle, and I think the relationship that we see in the film is one that doesn't often get represented. Typically when you think about two teenage guys getting locked in a laundromat and falling under a magical spell, you can imagine there's going to be a lot of goofing off, a lot of shenanigans, maybe some pretty stupid decisions, and we do a little bit of that. But in reality, by the end of the film, it's a very heartfelt film. It's a film about friendship. It's a film that I hope people will take away an inspiration and maybe some motivation to look at their own relationships and think about the honesty and the depth of relationship that they have with their closest friends or family members. You know, it's very strange to me that we live in possibly the most well connected time of human history. We have more ways to connect to each other, I think, arguably than ever before. With, whatever, fill in the blank, social media or the internet or all the different ways that we can connect with people. And yet we're experiencing a loneliness epidemic. Those two things don't seem like they should be able to coexist, and they do. And I think that this film offers a way for people to think about and be inspired to think about their relationships. It doesn't preach about, social media. I'm not suggesting that anybody, throw away their phone or anything like that. But what it does do is it places a kind of a very narrow spotlight on just two people and how two people interact and how two people can share the truest version of themselves with each other and be safe in those moments of vulnerability. And I hope that people want that in their lives and want to provide that to other people in their lives. And that's kind of my biggest hope.
Well, of course, as a longtime interviewer yourself, something just occurred to me that I should ask you. Is there a friendship or friendships in your life that influenced you, you know, to write this script or to
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very great question. Anytime you hear somebody talk about something as passionately as I just did, you always know you want to double click, right? So I think most people who know me at all will be able to watch the film and understand that we borrow a lot from the relationship that I have with my business partner, my co-founder in 12 Stars Media, Zach. We started our company when we were young. We've been through a lot together and have supported each other in a lot of ways, and absolutely represent the kind of relationship and the kind of friendship that I hope other people have and can develop. And if they don't, I hope they see that in this film, and maybe in the lives, the real lives of me and of Zach, or of other people, maybe in your life, that you could look at and say,
Well,
okay,
again, one more thing we have in common. I have a business partner, Dustin Klein, of 10 years, and now I have a new collaborator. I've told you I'm producing a new documentary, and I have a collaborator who is a musician who is River James. That's the topic of my documentary. A country western star who I was mentoring very briefly, and then he died unexpectedly of a brain tumor. So I have another collaborator in my life, and so yes, a lot of what the film about, I certainly experience and have experienced. So I'm excited to see the work, and I hope that you have the greatest success, and I hope my listeners tuning into this at some point, where do you foresee it? I know you're going to go to the festival route, correct?
Yeah, so we'll be at Heartland International Film Festival 3 times. So there's the world premiere on Sunday the 13th. There's another screening at Can on Tuesday the 15th, and then one more in Noblesville at Imagine Theaters on Thursday the 17th. And then after that, yeah, I do think that it'll probably be in some other festivals in various locations, but we do want to get it available for streaming pretty quickly. We're not going to who's on
your wish list
for streaming? I don't know. We'll have to see, but I think you'll see it in some places that'll be accessible to you. We like to self-distribute. We've self-distributed all of our documentaries. I think we'll self-distribute this as well, and so our goal is usually to have it at least in 3 or 4 places for you to be able to find it easily.
Right. Well, just like music has, you're able to bypass Hollywood, if you will, to get your work out there. So,
yeah.
But even then, it could eventually land in those places too, if it's popular.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official neighborhood newsletter for 16 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.